It is 1 minute past midnight, the 15th of November, 1942. Below the armored deck of an American battleship, 4 men sit around a mechanical computer the size of half a room, feeding it numbers by hand under red battle lamps. None of these men can see the enemy. None of them need to. 8,400 yards off the port bow, a Japanese battleship is steering north through black water. Her name is Kirishima. She is 30 years old. She was at Pearl Harbor the morning America went to war. Her lookouts stand on her bridge with the finest night binoculars in the world, scanning the horizon. They see nothing but darkness and low cloud. In the next 7 minutes, Kirishima will die. She will lose her bridge, her steering, her engines. 212 of her sailors will go down with her into 4,000 feet of black water. And when they go, they will never know the name of the man who killed them. He is 54 years old. He wears wire-rimmed glasses. His hair is thinning. He stands quietly in the plotting room of the American battleship, watching a single green dot move across a curved glass screen. That green dot is Kirishima. This is the story of the 7 minutes that ended one age of war at sea, and began the one we still live in. To understand those 7 minutes, you have to understand a small green island in the South Pacific, Guadalcanal, and a muddy airstrip on its northern coast called Henderson Field. American Marines landed on Guadalcanal on the 7th of August, 1942, wading ashore through the surf with rifles held over their heads. They expected a fight. What they got was 3 months of tropical disease, hunger, and night attacks from the sea. Every night, Japanese destroyers slipped down the island chain, shelling the airfield and landing more troops before dawn. American sailors gave these night runs a name, the Tokyo Express. At night, in November of 1942, the Pacific Ocean belongs to Japan. For 20 years, the Imperial Japanese Navy has trained for darkness. Their lookouts stand for hours on open bridges, learning to spot a ship's silhouette by starlight alone. Their optics are the best in the world. Their torpedo, the Type 93, runs on pure oxygen and leaves almost no wake in the water. It travels 3 times farther than anything the Americans own. In August, off an island called Savo, 4 Allied cruisers were sunk in 32 minutes by a Japanese force that arrived unseen. American ships had radar that night. Their crews did not trust it. They were still staring through binoculars when the first Japanese shells hit their decks. The lesson keeps repeating itself. Radar alone cannot save you if you do not believe in it. Then comes the night of the 12th of November. 2 American rear admirals, Daniel Callahan and Norman Scott, lead a force of cruisers and destroyers into the water north of Guadalcanal, into a stretch of sea already so full of sunken ships the sailors call it Iron Bottom Sound. What follows is not a battle. It is a knife fight in a closet. Ships fire at each other from 3,000 yards away. Searchlights sweep across black water. Muzzle flashes light up burning decks. By dawn, 2 American cruisers lie on the bottom. 4 destroyers are gone. The light cruiser Juno, gutted and limping home, is torpedoed by a Japanese submarine and lost with almost her entire crew, including 5 brothers from Waterloo, Iowa, named Sullivan. More than 700 American sailors are dead. Both Rear Admirals Callahan and Scott are killed within minutes of each other on separate burning ships. They are the only 2 American flag officers killed in a surface battle in the entire Pacific War. And the Japanese are coming back tomorrow night with another battleship. Her name is Kirishima. Around her sail 2 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 9 destroyers. Their orders are to burn Henderson Field to the ground and land the reinforcements that will end the campaign. The man who has to stop them is Vice Admiral William F. Halsey, 60 years old, the commander of the entire South Pacific. He stands in his headquarters in Noumea, staring at charts, and he has almost nothing left. His cruisers are shattered. His destroyers are scattered. He has 1 carrier in the area, the wounded USS Enterprise, still patching battle damage. Escorting Enterprise are 2 American battleships, Washington and South Dakota. Naval doctrine says you never strip a carrier of her battleship escort. Doctrine says you never send fast battleships into a night surface action in narrow water. Doctrine says you wait for daylight. Halsey reads the reports. He looks at the chart. And then he does something that ends careers when it is wrong. He tears doctrine in half. He detaches Washington and South Dakota from Enterprise. He gives them 4 destroyers, Walk, Benham, Preston, and Gwynn, and sends them north into the dark. 6 ships against 14. The man he sends into that dark water is named Willis Augustus Lee. Lee is 54 years old, a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and thinning hair. At Navy staff meetings, while other admirals make loud speeches, Lee sits quietly and writes equations in the margins of his notes. He looks like a country schoolteacher who wandered into a naval uniform by mistake. He is also the best marksman the United States Navy has ever produced. In 1920, at the Antwerp Olympic Games, Willis Lee wins 7 medals in the shooting events: 5 gold, 1 silver, 1 bronze. He stands on the podium as the most decorated athlete of those games. His record will stand for 60 years. What Lee learns at Antwerp is not how to shoot a rifle. He already knows that. What he learns is that hitting a target at long range is a problem of pure physics: wind, temperature, barometric pressure, the slow drift of a bullet across 1,000 yards. The men around him in the Navy still fight ships by feel and by eye. Lee starts thinking about how to fight them with mathematics instead. While other officers chase prestige commands on famous ships, Lee buries himself in dusty laboratories and gunnery ranges. He reads every British report about a strange new technology called radar, radio waves that bounce off enemy ships and return as clean numbers of range and bearing. By 1940, Lee has walked the American radar laboratories, studied the antennas and memorized the wavelengths. The sailors who serve under him say it plainly: Ching Lee knows more about radar than the radar operators do. The nickname Ching came from his academy days, when a young Kentucky boy fascinated by East Asian history amused his classmates. The name followed him for 30 years. He never complains about it. In August of 1942, Lee is given command of Battleship Division 6, the new fast battleships Washington and South Dakota. He makes Washington his flagship. Then he does something almost no other admiral in the American Navy is willing to do. He rebuilds his flagship around the radar. In the old doctrine, radar was a backup system. The bridge crew found the enemy with their eyes and only checked the range on radar afterwards. Orders passed down through layers of officers before reaching the guns. Lee cuts those layers out entirely. On Washington, the surface search radar feeds range data directly into the plotting room. The fire control radar feeds numbers straight to the gun directors. The mechanical computer solves the firing problem in real time, while the ship maneuvers and the enemy moves. The men in the plotting room never need to see the enemy or the sea or even the sky. They only need to trust the numbers on their screens. Lee drills them relentlessly. He conducts main battery exercises off the coast of Maine in complete darkness, firing at target sleds the gunners never see. The shells land within yards of the targets. In a Navy whose senior officers grew up reading the wind and glancing up from a chart, this is heresy. Captain Glenn B. Davis, the commanding officer of Washington, is 49 years old, a career officer who reads technical manuals on his off watch. Davis says very little. He listens and he drills the procedures and he decides in his own quiet way to believe. By the time Halsey's order arrives on the 14th of November, Washington's crew has learned to fight by electronics, in the dark, trusting a green glow on a glass screen more than the eyes in their own heads. What none of them know yet, as Washington turns her bow toward Guadalcanal under a moonless sky, is that everything they have practiced will be tested in the next 7 minutes, against a ship that has been at sea since the year Theodore Roosevelt was president. 2300 hours. The 14th of November, 1942. Task Force 64 rounds the western point of Guadalcanal and turns north into Iron Bottom Sound. 6 American warships move in single file through black water. 4 destroyers lead: Walk, Benham, Preston and Gwynn. 2,000 yards behind them, the long dark silhouette of USS Washington cuts through the sea. 2,000 yards behind Washington, the larger shape of USS South Dakota. The tropical air is warm and thick, 85 degrees. There is no moon. Low cloud has erased the stars. Far to the east, heat lightning flickers over some distant storm and dies again. Off the beach of Guadalcanal drifts the smell of jungle, wetwood, gun oil, and the old smoke of a campaign that has been burning for 3 months. Visibility is less than a mile. It is perfect weather for radar. It is the worst weather in the world for a human lookout. Iron Bottom Sound itself is only 8 miles wide, hemmed in between Guadalcanal to the south and Savo Island to the north. Its floor is packed with sunken ships from earlier battles: Japanese, Australian, American. Sailors joke that you could walk from one shore to the other on the wrecks without getting your feet wet. It is no place to maneuver a battleship. Lee has no choice. He takes his 6 ships into that narrow sound, into the dark, into the wrecks, and waits for the door to open. 23:05. Washington's surface search radar picks up its first contacts beyond Savo Island. Multiple groups of ships moving south. The plotting team writes the numbers on a clear glass board with grease pencils. Lee stands beside the chart in the flag plot with a headset on. He does not speak. He listens as the contact count rises: 10 ships, 12, 14. Kondo has split his force into 3 separate groups, exactly as Lee predicted. Lee picks up the short-range radio microphone. His voice is quiet, almost mild. He says only 4 sentences. "This is Lee. We are going into a big fight. Keep your heads. Trust your instruments." There is no speech. No exhortation. Nothing about country or glory or the 700 Americans dead 2 nights ago. Just what he believes a fighting crew actually needs. At the head of the destroyer column, Commander Thomas E. Fraser stares at his own radar screen on the bridge of USS Washington. Fraser is the most experienced destroyer skipper in the task force. He watches the Japanese destroyer screen come over the horizon, 12,000 yards away. Fraser calls Washington by radio and asks Lee for permission to launch torpedoes. It is the obvious move, the whole reason destroyers exist. 10 Mark 15 torpedoes sit ready in 2 mounts on his deck. Lee says no. In the dark, with so many ships maneuvering at high speed in narrow water, no man will be able to tell American torpedoes from Japanese ones. Friendly fire by torpedo has happened before, and Lee will not let it happen tonight. Fraser acknowledges. He passes the order to his gun crews. He will fight a Japanese destroyer division at point-blank range without the weapon his ship was built around. He has 18 minutes left to live. 23:17. Washington's main battery opens fire for the first time in her career, not on Kirishima, but on the Japanese cruiser Sendai to the south. 9 16-inch shells lift out of the muzzles in orange fire, each shell weighing more than a small car. On Sendai's bridge, Japanese officers see the muzzle flashes before they hear the guns. A wall of white water taller than her mainmast comes up around their ship. Sendai's captain does the only sane thing. He turns his ship and runs, disappearing into a screen of black smoke from his own funnels. In Washington's radio intercept room, American sailors listen through headphones as Japanese voices flood the open channels, excited, panicked, talking over each other. The Japanese had no idea American battleships were in these waters. They have just learned. North of Sendai, Vice Admiral Nobutake Kondo is still coming on with the main body, Kirishima, and the heavy cruisers at Tago and Takao. He has not yet been engaged. He still believes the night belongs to him. And the American destroyers up front have already been spotted. On the bridge of the Japanese destroyer Ayanami, Lieutenant Commander Eiji Sakuma has stood at his station for hours. His lookouts have been dark adapted since sunset. He does not need radar. He can see the American destroyers with his naked eyes, a column of darker shapes moving against slightly less dark water. He counts them and passes the count to his gunners. Ayanami fires first. She launches a spread of Type 93 long lance torpedoes, 24 feet long, running on pure oxygen at 48 knots. They leave almost no wake on the surface of the water. They are 3 times deadlier than anything in the American arsenal. A Japanese searchlight snaps on across Ayanami's bridge wing. The white beam stabs across the black chop and finds Wak. Fraser is illuminated like a man pinned in a stage spotlight. Every Japanese gun in line of sight opens fire. Wak is hit before her own guns finish their first salvo. 5-inch shells punch through her forward superstructure. Fires bloom along her deck. Fraser orders hard left rudder and returns fire, scoring visible hits on Ayanami, blowing out her searchlight, knocking down a Japanese deckhouse. But Ayanami is not alone. 2 more Japanese destroyers join the fight. The light cruiser Nagara opens up at 8,000 yards with her 5.5-inch guns. A torpedo wake passes under Wak's stern by feet. Another runs wide. Fraser fires all 10 of his torpedoes at once, simply to clear the tubes. They will hit something or miss everything, but at least they will not be aboard his ship when she dies. 23:26. A Japanese shell penetrates Wak's forward magazine. Several tons of American ammunition detonate at once in a single fireball. The forward half of the destroyer, from the bow back through the bridge, simply ceases to exist. Commander Fraser is gone before he knows the magazine has been hit. Walk breaks in two. The bow section sinks immediately. The stern hangs in the water for 30 seconds, burning before it capsizes and slides under. About 75 of Walk's men die with her. About 60 men get clear and float in their Kapok life jackets, watching the rest of the battle from the water. 600 yards behind Walk, on the bridge of USS Preston, Commander Max C. Storm sees his lead destroyer come apart in front of him in a wall of flame. He keeps coming north. There is nothing else to do. Preston's 5-inch battery opens up on Ayanami and Nagara. Multiple Japanese ships answer at once. The first Japanese salvo destroys Preston's radar antenna. The second penetrates her after engine room. High-pressure steam lines burst inside the compartment. Every American sailor in that engine room is killed in less than a second. Superheated steam at 600 degrees fills the space. They do not have time to scream. 23:30. A long lance torpedo hits Preston amidships on the starboard side. Her keel breaks. The ship folds in the middle like a broken toy. Storms orders abandon ship. He stays on the bridge, helping his sailors climb over the side into the black water. He never gets off. Less than 30 seconds after his order, Preston rolls onto her starboard beam and sinks bow first, taking 117 of her men with her. Lieutenant Commander John B. Taylor, the skipper of USS Benham, watches 2 American destroyers die in front of him in the space of a few minutes. He throws his rudder hard right to clear the burning wreckage and the men floating in the water. A Type 93 torpedo hits Benham at the waterline, 30 feet back from her bow. 60 feet of ship simply vanishes in the explosion. The anchor windlass, the forward gun mounts, the paint locker, the crew quarters. All of it gone in a single flash. But the torpedo strikes forward of Benham's main watertight bulkhead. The bulkhead holds. Water rushes into the wound and stops at a wall of inch-thick steel. Benham is now 60 feet shorter than she was a minute ago, but she is still floating, still steering, still running her engines. Not one of her crew is killed by the hit. It is the only piece of good news in the destroyer column tonight. Benham will limp south at 5 knots through the darkness. The next day, after every attempt to save her fails, her sister ship USS Gwynn will take off her crew and scuttle her. Every man aboard Benham goes home. Gwynn, last in the column, takes a Japanese shell in her after-engine room. Several engineers die in the blast. One turbine goes silent. The other holds. Of the 4 destroyers Halsey could scrape together, 2 lie on the bottom. One is mortally wounded. One is bleeding. Lee has lost more American sailors in 15 minutes than the entire Battle of Midway. On the Japanese side, Lieutenant Commander Sakuma's Ayanami has been shredded by American 5-inch shells. Fires burn along her deck. Her steering is gone. She drifts in the dark, her damage control parties fighting a losing battle. She will sink before dawn. Sakuma stays on her bridge and goes down with his ship. On the surface, this is a brutal trade. A Japanese destroyer for 3 American ones. It is exactly the price Lee accepted when he put his destroyers up front. And it is the moment the battle changes. Because 2,000 yards behind Walk's burning wreckage, something else is happening. Something Vice Admiral Kondo does not yet understand. USS South Dakota, the second American battleship, is about to take herself out of the fight. And no Japanese gun is going to do it. South Dakota's captain is Thomas L. Gatch, 51 years old, aggressive, the kind of officer who likes to be in front. Earlier that year he ran his battleship aground in the Tonga Islands. A few weeks later he collided with the American destroyer Mahan. He still has his command. When the destroyer action erupts, Gatch maneuvers South Dakota independently. He does not stay tucked behind Washington. He swings his ship to starboard, hunting for a firing solution, and puts himself in the burning destroyer water, silhouetted against the fires of Walk and Preston. But the disaster that ruins South Dakota does not come from Japanese guns. It comes from inside her own hull. Earlier that evening, in the quiet before the action, an American electrical repair team had been working on a stubborn circuit breaker in one of her main switchboards. The breaker kept tripping. An engineer, under pressure to keep every system online for the coming battle, made a decision. He tied the breaker down with wire. He locked it in the closed position. He forced it to stay shut even if a fault tried to throw it open. It is a violation of every electrical safety procedure in the United States Navy. It is a violation for a reason. 2333. A fault occurs somewhere in South Dakota's power grid. The breaker that should have tripped cannot trip. It is wired shut. The fault has nowhere to go, so it goes everywhere. The next breaker upstream trips. Then the one upstream of that. Then the one upstream of that. In a matter of seconds, the entire main electrical distribution system of a 35,000-ton American battleship cascades into total darkness. Her radars go dead. Her fire control computers freeze. Her gun directors lose power. Her ammunition hoists stop moving in mid-lift. Her radios fall silent. Even the emergency battle lanterns fail in some compartments. The most modern battleship in the American Navy goes completely blind in the middle of a battle she has not yet finished joining. Damage control parties grope through pitch-black passageways with hand flashlights, trying to find the fault. She drifts forward on her own momentum, steering only by hand at the emergency wheel, with no idea where the Japanese are. She is a battleship with no eyes, and she is sailing straight into Kondo's main body. As midnight approaches on the 15th of November, partial power flickers back on South Dakota. A radar comes on. A director wakes up. But by then she has drifted to within 5,500 yards of the Japanese line, the inside of a city block in battleship terms. The Japanese heavy cruiser at Tago snaps on a searchlight. The white beam finds South Dakota in less than a second. She is perfectly framed, silhouetted from behind by the burning American destroyers, lit from the front by a Japanese searchlight she cannot shoot out because her gun directors are still rebooting. 35,000 tons of new American battleship, standing in the spotlight at 5,000 yards. Every Japanese ship in line of sight opens fire on her at once. Kirishima's 14-inch main battery fires at point-blank range. Atago and Takao add their 8-inch cruiser guns. Nagara joins in with her 5.5-inch. The destroyer Asagumo adds her 5-inch. In 3 minutes, South Dakota is hit at least 27 times. Most of the hits are smaller caliber. None of them punch through her heavy belt armor or the face plates of her main turrets. Her armor does exactly what her designers intended, but everything above the armor is meat to be carved. The forward main battery director takes a direct hit from a 14-inch shell. The shell does not penetrate the director's armor. Does not have to. The kinetic shock alone kills every American sailor inside. Radar antennas that she has just gotten back are shattered by shell fragments. Secondary gun mounts are blown off their pedestals. Her superstructure becomes a colander. 39 American sailors are killed. 59 more are wounded. A bosun's mate, 20 years old, dies in his gun tub. A signalman dies on a wing of the bridge. A young Marine posted as a sentry near the after director dies at his station, his rifle still slung on his shoulder. Their names will not be in the battle dispatches tomorrow. Their names will be in telegrams that arrive at houses across the United States over the next 3 weeks. A mother in Ohio. A father in California. A wife in Norfolk, 6 months pregnant. Captain Gatch survives the shelling. A shell fragment opens the side of his neck. He is bleeding heavily before a corpsman reaches him with a compress. But he is alive. His ship is alive. Her engines are still running. She is also blind. Gatch orders a hard turn to starboard and breaks contact. South Dakota disappears back south into the dark, fires burning along her topsides, smoke trailing behind her like a flag. She has been in combat with the Japanese main body for less than 5 minutes. Inside the operations rooms of 3 different Japanese ships, in the chart house of Kondo's flagship Atago, a quiet certainty settles in. They have just defeated the American battleship. They believe it because they have not seen another one. They have not seen another one because Vice Admiral Lee has done exactly what he set out to do. Washington sits 2,000 yards to the north, in deeper shadow, her own gun blasts from minutes ago lost in the chaos of the destroyer battle. The Japanese radar is not good enough to separate 2 large contacts in the surface clutter. The famous Japanese night optics, the finest binoculars in the world, are blinded by their own searchlights, their own muzzle flashes, the burning American destroyers and the burning South Dakota. Kondo reads the picture in front of him. One American battleship, illuminated, hit, withdrawing. A destroyer screen destroyed. He has lost only 1 destroyer of his own. The path to Henderson Field is now open. He believes he has won this battle. You will believe it for the next 19 minutes. Inside the plotting room of USS Washington, below the armor deck, 4 American sailors sit around the mechanical computer in the red glow of battle lamps. Gears turn. Cams shift. A brass pointer slides across a graduated wheel. Fresh range data feeds in every 2 seconds from the fire control radar 60 feet above their heads. Bearing 330. Range 8,400 yards. Speed 18 knots. The computer solves the lead. The gun directors elevate the barrels. 9 16-inch rifles and 3 triple turrets are now pointing at a Japanese battleship none of the men in that compartment has ever seen with their own eyes. On Washington's bridge, Captain Glenn Davis glances at Vice Admiral Lee. Lee is watching the radar repeater screen. The bright green dot that is Kirishima moves slowly, steadily, fat with the overconfidence of a man who believes he has already won. Lee has been tracking her for 20 minutes. She still does not know he exists. Lee turns his head toward Davis. His voice does not change. Stand by, Glenn. Here they come. It is the stroke of midnight, the 14th of November turning into the 15th of November, 1942. In the next 7 minutes, the way navies fight at sea is about to change forever. Midnight. 9 16-inch rifles on USS Washington fire as one gun. The blast lights the sea for half a mile in every direction. A wall of sound rolls back across the water. It empties the air out of a man's lungs if he is standing on the open deck and forgets to open his mouth. 24,000 pounds of American steel and high explosive leave the muzzles in a single second. Washington herself heels 8 feet to starboard from the recoil, rolling on her keel like a small boat in a swell. 9 armor-piercing shells climb into the night. Each shell stands 5.5 feet tall, the height of a small man, and weighs as much as an automobile. Each carries 40 pounds of bursting charge sealed behind a hardened steel nose. The shells rise to 20,000 feet at the top of their arc. They come down at a steep angle, the angle that finds a battleship's deck armor because the deck is the thinnest plate she has. Time of flight to the target, 20 seconds. On the bridge of Kirishima, Captain Sanji Iwabuchi is 49 years old. He has spent his entire career preparing for this exact moment, a night gun action between battleships. He has watched his destroyers tear the American screen apart. He has watched searchlights find the American battleship and watched her turn away in flames. His lookouts are facing forward, scanning the dark approach to Henderson Field. He does not know there is a second American battleship. He learns when the deck of his flagship explodes under his feet. Washington's first salvo lands on Kirishima's forward superstructure and main deck. 2 shells strike the bridge tower and detonate. The rangefinder on top of the tower disintegrates in a shower of steel fragments. Fire control wiring is severed. Communications go dead in the same instant. Men on the bridge are killed by concussion alone, without a single fragment touching them, by the kinetic shock of 2,700-pound projectiles arriving inside steel walls. Captain Iwabuchi is knocked off his feet. He survives. Most of the men around him do not. Smoke fills the bridge. Electrical lights flicker and die. Iwabuchi gets to one knee, then to his feet. He tries to call the gunnery officer on the bridge telephone. The phone is dead. He orders return fire by voice tube to his after turrets, the only guns he still has any chance of pointing. The second American salvo arrives 30 seconds later. Below decks on Washington, gun crews are already reloading in the hot semi-darkness of the turrets. Powder handlers pass 6 silk-covered powder bags into each breech. The breech blocks slam shut with a heavy metallic clang. The director updates the firing solution from the latest radar range. 9 more 16-inch shells lift into the night sky. This salvo lands amidships and forward on Kirishima. 1 shell penetrates the armor deck near her forward magazines, the most dangerous hit a battleship can take. The shell drives through the deck and explodes 1 level above the powder magazine itself. Fire spread. Captain Iwabuchi orders the forward magazines flooded with seawater. The standard measure to prevent a chain detonation that would tear his ship apart in a single flash. The flooding saves the ship from blowing up. The flooding also disables her entire forward main battery. Without ammunition feed, her forward turrets are now scrap metal. Another shell from the same American salvo brings down Kirishima's main mast and the backup fire control director mounted on it. The heavy steel director falls onto the deck below, crushing Japanese sailors underneath. Kirishima's eyes are gone. She tries to fight anyway. Her after turrets, number 3 and number 4, are still mechanically working. The local gun captains inside those turrets can see Washington's muzzle flashes to the southwest. Bright stuttering glares in the darkness every 30 seconds. They have no radar. They have no working optics. They must estimate the range to their enemy by the brightness of the American muzzle flashes alone. They estimate Washington at 10,000 yards. Washington is actually at 8,600 yards. Kirishima's after turrets fire a salvo of 14-inch shells. They scream out across the dark water toward the American muzzle flashes that just killed her bridge. The Japanese shells pass over Washington's masts by perhaps 200 feet. A young sailor on Washington's signal bridge will say afterwards that he could feel the pressure wave of the shells on his face as they passed overhead. He will say it sounded like an express train going by in the dark, high in the air above him. 200 feet at 8,000 yards is the entire margin. If Iwabuchi's gunners had guessed 8,000 yards instead of 10,000, those 9 14-inch shells would have come down on Washington's wooden deck instead of through her rigging. A single wrong guess, made by men who could not see their target, is why Washington is still alive. Washington's third salvo lands amidships on Kirishima with 3 penetrating hits. One shell drives through her side armor and explodes inside her forward engine room. Boilers rupture. Steam lines burst. The Japanese engineering watch is killed by superheated steam before any man has time to climb a ladder. Another shell punches into her after engine room with the same result. Kirishima's speed begins to fall. 20 knots, 18-15. Washington's fourth salvo, 30 seconds later, finds Kirishima's steering. A shell penetrates the deck above the steering gear compartment near her rudder and explodes. The hydraulic lines that turn 36,000 tons of ship are cut in half. Kirishima's rudder jams to port. She begins to circle slowly in the dark, unable to control her own course. Washington's fifth salvo opens Kirishima below the waterline on the starboard side. Seawater pours in. Her list begins. The sixth salvo finishes her after turrets, the only guns she had left in the fight. Aboard Washington, the gun crews are sweating in the heat of the turrets. The plotting room calls out fresh ranges every 2 seconds. The directors keep tracking. The mechanical computer grinds its gears and updates the firing solution. Captain Davis paces the bridge in tight, controlled steps. Lee stands beside the radar repeater, his face lit green by the screen, watching the bright dot that is Kirishima begin to slow and turn and slow again. At 1 minute past midnight, Kirishima was moving at 18 knots. At 7 minutes past midnight, she is dead in the water. In those same 7 minutes, Washington has fired 75 rounds of 16-inch and 107 rounds of 5-inch. Deep-sea sonar surveys of the wreck decades later will suggest that between 9 and 20 of the 16-inch shells hit Kirishima, and perhaps another 17 to 40 of the 5-inch found their mark. The exact count will never be known. Too many of the hits went into spaces that flooded and sank before any human eye could record them. What is known is that Kirishima cannot move. She cannot fight. She cannot steer. And she cannot put out her fires. At 7 minutes past midnight, Lee gives the order to cease fire. There is no point in spending more ammunition on a ship that is already finished. And there are other things to worry about now. Japanese destroyers have been launching long-lance torpedoes the whole time Washington has been firing. Dozens of them are in the water, running on courses set by gunners who guessed at Washington's position from her muzzle flashes. Lee orders the helm hard over. Washington swings hard left, then hard right, zigzagging at 25 knots through a maze of running torpedoes she cannot see on the black surface. American lookouts on the wings of Washington's bridge spot torpedo wakes in the water. There should be no wakes at all, the long lance leaves almost none, but the sheer number of torpedoes in the water means a few catch the right angle of light. One wake passes 100 yards ahead of Washington's bow. Another 100 yards astern. A third, by one sailor's count, runs the length of the ship within touching distance to starboard. None of them hit. By half past midnight, Washington is clear of the torpedo water. By 3 o'clock in the morning of the 15th of November, Lee gives the order to withdraw. The mission is finished. Henderson Field is safe. Behind Washington, on a darkened patch of water 7 miles northwest of Savo Island, Captain Iwabuchi is making his last decision aboard a battleship. Japanese destroyers have come alongside Kirishima. Wounded sailors are being transferred by stretcher. The fires cannot be controlled. The list is climbing past 15 degrees. Her forward magazines are already flooded, but other compartments are now flooding on their own. There are no pumps left that can keep up. At 3:25 in the morning, Captain Iwabuchi orders the sea valves opened. He gives the order to abandon ship. His men have done their duty. Kirishima rolls slowly to starboard. She goes down by the bow into the black water. 212 Japanese sailors go down with her, into nearly 4,000 feet of Pacific Ocean. Half a century later, an American oceanographer named Robert Ballard will find her on the bottom. Upside down, her heavy turrets broken from their seats and resting in the silt beside her hull. The wounds Washington put in her side are still visible in the lights of a deep-water camera. USS Washington has not been hit once. Not one man on her crew has been wounded. Her paint is unmarred by battle damage. The only thing different about her in the morning light is that her 16-inch gun barrels are blackened from breech to muzzle by the heat of 7 minutes of continuous fire. The action report Captain Davis writes in the days afterward contains one sentence that will be quoted in American naval war colleges for the next 80 years. Radar has forced the officer in tactical command to base his actions on what he is told, rather than what he can see. It is a sentence about the end of one age of naval warfare, and the beginning of another. A few days after the battle, Vice Admiral Lee himself writes a private letter to Admiral Halsey. The letter is not what anyone expects from a commander who has just won the only battleship gunfight in the history of the United States Navy. Lee does not take the credit. He gives all of it away. He writes that the American victory at Guadalcanal was due almost entirely to the possession of radar. He writes that his men had no edge on the Japanese in experience, skill, training, or personal performance. A flag officer in writing to his theater commander, saying that his sailors were not better sailors. That his training was not better training. That the only reason any of his men were still alive was a piece of electronic equipment most admirals still did not trust. It is one of the most honest paragraphs ever written by a victorious American commander. The Navy files it away. Lee never makes a public speech about Guadalcanal. He never appears in a newsreel. He never writes a memoir. He is awarded the Navy Cross for the action and promoted to Vice Admiral the following year. He is sent on to command the fast battleships of the Pacific Fleet at the Marianas, the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. He works himself sick doing it. At 7 minutes past midnight, Lee gives the order to cease fire. There is no point in spending more ammunition on a ship that is already finished. And there are other things to worry about now. Japanese destroyers have been launching long-lance torpedoes the whole time Washington has been firing. Dozens of them are in the water, running on courses set by gunners who guessed at Washington's position from her muzzle flashes. Lee orders the helm hard over. Washington swings hard left, then hard right, zigzagging at 25 knots through a maze of running torpedoes she cannot see on the black surface. American lookouts on the wings of Washington's bridge spot torpedo wakes in the water. There should be no wakes at all, the long lance leaves almost none, but the sheer number of torpedoes in the water means a few catch the right angle of light. One wake passes 100 yards ahead of Washington's bow. Another 100 yards astern. A third, by one sailor's count, runs the length of the ship within touching distance to starboard. None of them hit. By midnight, Washington is clear of the torpedo water. By 3 o'clock in the morning of the 15th of November, Lee gives the order to withdraw. The mission is finished. Henderson Field is safe. Behind Washington, on a darkened patch of water 7 miles northwest of Savo Island, Captain Iwabuchi is making his last decision aboard a battleship. Japanese destroyers have come alongside Kirishima. Wounded sailors are being transferred by stretcher. The fires cannot be controlled. The list is climbing past 15 degrees. Her forward magazines are already flooded, but other compartments are now flooding on their own. There are no pumps left that can keep up. At 3:25 in the morning, Captain Iwabuchi orders the sea valves opened. He gives the order to abandon ship. His men have done their duty. Kirishima rolls slowly to starboard. She goes down by the bow into the black water. 212 Japanese sailors go down with her, into nearly 4,000 feet of Pacific Ocean. Half a century later, an American oceanographer named Robert Ballard will find her on the bottom. Upside down, her heavy turrets broken from their seats and resting in the silt beside her hull. The wounds Washington put in her side are still visible in the lights of a deep-water camera. USS Washington has not been hit once. Not one man on her crew has been wounded. Her paint is unmarred by battle damage. The only thing different about her in the morning light is that her 16-inch gun barrels are blackened from breech to muzzle by the heat of 7 minutes of continuous fire. The action report Captain Davis writes in the days afterward contains one sentence that will be quoted in American naval war colleges for the next 80 years. Radar has forced the officer in tactical command to base his actions on what he is told, rather than what he can see. It is a sentence about the end of one age of naval warfare, and the beginning of another. A few days after the battle, Vice Admiral Lee himself writes a private letter to Admiral Halsey. The letter is not what anyone expects from a commander who has just won the only battleship gunfight in the history of the United States Navy. Lee does not take the credit. He gives all of it away. He writes that the American victory at Guadalcanal was due almost entirely to the possession of radar. He writes that his men had no edge on the Japanese in experience, skill, training, or personal performance. A flag officer in writing to his theater commander, saying that his sailors were not better sailors. That his training was not better training. That the only reason any of his men were still alive was a piece of electronic equipment most admirals still did not trust. It is one of the most honest paragraphs ever written by a victorious American commander. The Navy files it away. Lee never makes a public speech about Guadalcanal. He never appears in a newsreel. He never writes a memoir. He is awarded the Navy Cross for the action and promoted to Vice Admiral the following year. He is sent on to command the fast battleships of the Pacific Fleet at the Marianas, the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. He works himself sick doing it,